First, I wanna take this opportunity to thank you all for inviting me to speak to you today. Suquamish is home. When I talk about going to church and still being a part of a community, Suquamish is exactly where I find myself. So I thank you for that. For those of you who don't know, I'm still in Navy, still doing all awesome things. They're getting ready to send me to Guam. However, right now I am broadcasting from Cherry Point, North Carolina, uh, in the middle of nowhere. But it is it is where they decided to send me. So I appreciate again where everyone is for this community and the ability to be a part of it. As we move into today's message, I know we're talking today about Transgender Day of Remembrance. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to mourn. And actually, the word I like to use today is lament. To lament is a prayer of expressing sorrow, pain, or confusion nearly as a collective. Grief is best expressed with a group of people who provide that support around us with that loss. But when we lament, I really think that it is an expression of collective grief felt by a community, and it won't be healed individually. It can only be collective sorrow requires collective healing. And that's what we're here to do today. We have expressions of great lament throughout this country and all over the world. We see it almost every day. We see it in our Civil War battlefields. We see it in our memorials. We see it in the memorials to the children who died in Indian schools, to the Emmett Till Memorial, to Arlington National Cemetery and the Tomb of the Unknown. These are expressions of our collective grief as a community. Same with the 9/11 memorial, as I remember where I was when that happened. I remember the collective grief of standing in line in Afghanistan and watching two sailors that we had lost be put on the plane to be flown home. I still can't listen to the God of Our Fathers song without remembering that day. At the Submarine Birthday Ball every year, we have the tolling of the bells to lament as a community the loss of our men getting underway on submarines. In June of 2015, a trans service member that we all knew lost her battle with suicide. And I remember where I was, and I remember not being able to go to the memorial, but I also remember us making space for others to express their feelings. As we come together on Transgender Day of Remembrance, it is important for us to remember that this day was created as a public lament for those that have been lost to the epidemic of violence throughout our country against transgender people. Since 2022 to today, worldwide, we've lost somewhere in the neighborhood of 350 by some sources. In the US, we've lost 53 trans and gender non-conforming siblings to violence. In addition to that, that is up from 47 from last year. In addition to 33 that we lost by suicide that we can account for, and that does not include the ones who may or may not have been identified or misidentified through their various outlets that we don't know about. This communal event and lament offers something that we cannot get when we grieve alone. Through that acknowledgement and validation and witnessing, which we will do later today, this communal lament allows us to experience a level of healing that is deeply and profoundly healing. The Bible gives us words and a voice to these lamentations. We have an entire book called Lamentations. In Lamentations 3, verses 19 and 20, we hear, "Remember my affliction and my wandering and the wormwood and the bitterness. Surely my soul remembers and is bowed down within me." Moving over to chapter 5 of the same book, chapter 5, verses 20 and through 22. Why do you forget us forever? Why do you forsake us so long? Restore us to you, O Lord, that we may be restored. Renew our days as of old, unless you have utterly rejected us and are exceedingly angry with us. We acknowledge our pain. We have to. We have to acknowledge our level of pain that comes with being a part of a community that is constantly being attacked. Communal lament means that we take that pain and we share it, and we share the burden so that it's not carried alone. And because it isn't carried alone, we do not heal alone. For every lament in the Bible, there is room for hope. Every time the Bible talks about sorrow and grief, and every time we talk about the community of sorrow and grief and lament, we follow that by a sense of hope. In Lamentations chapter 3, when we talked about our wandering and our wormwood and our bitterness, we go on to verses 21 to 22, and it says, "This I recall to my mind, therefore I have hope. The Lord's loving kindness indeed never ceases, for his compassions never fail." And then when he turns out that the book of Psalms, almost a third of Psalms is dedicated simply to grief. And I move over to Psalms 30 because it's one of my favorite verses on hope. Psalm 30, verses 4 and 5. Sing praise unto the Lord, you his godly ones, and give thanks to his holy name. For his anger is but a moment, his favor but a lifetime. Weeping may last for the night, but the shout comes in the morning. So yes, today we're going to mourn. Today we're going to lament. And we're going to read the names of those that we have lost, several of the names that we have lost later on in the service. We must remember that in the morning, we must fight for the living so that we may mourn less. Pope Francis said, first we pray for the poor, and then we feed them. Hope does not come without action. My captain used to say that hope is not a course of action. So with that hope, we must move towards actionable, concrete steps. God provides us hope to spur us into action. Similar to what Pope Francis said, when we pray for the poor, we must feed them. So that is exactly what we must do. We must take action for our transgender siblings. In our country today, over 500 bills have been released that are aimed at the LGBT community throughout the United States. Many of them are focused specifically on the transgender community. They affect, and I'm going to talk in sense that they affect on me. They affect my right to exist in public. They affect my access to medical care. They affect my ability to have the freedom to look as I see myself. They affect my access to restrooms. In fact, I can't go. It is unwise for me to go to the state of Florida because it is illegal for me to use the restroom. They affect our youth to make decisions with their parents and their doctors. So in our mournfulness, tomorrow we must take action. And I'm gonna bring together about 6 different actions that I think that we can all take together. And the first is that we create inclusive spaces. Suquamish United Church of Christ has already done much of this. You have always been an inclusive space and never taken less of an opportunity to learn and include those who may find themselves in a different space. In including that, we one of the things that we can do is include pronouns in our signature blocks and when we introduce ourselves. I have this in my work email. I have it in my personal email that I will use, that I typically put my pronouns he, him in there. Many can assume that I'm a guy, but by adding those pronouns, I create a safe space for others who want to make sure that they are addressed as they see themselves. It is arrogant of me to assume that I know someone better than they know themselves. And so that creates space for them to express themselves and for them to know that you know what they express that to be. The second thing that I ask us to do is to learn our history. Be ready with stories to tell of successful trans people. So often, and there's a documentary on Netflix that talks about this, that talks about how transgender people are portrayed in our media and our stories and our public venues. They constantly highlight the fact that we are either sad or underemployed or doing things to or ill-adjusted or over-demanding or psychopaths or any number of the things that the media has portrayed transgender people to do. So I encourage you to help break that cycle and be ready to tell the stories of successful transgender people. There are so many. There are definitely articles. You can use me as an example. You can even take them to the museum and show them my big gigantic life-size photo of myself that's standing in front of talking to people to show them that our youth, they cannot be what they cannot see. So often I think that sometimes our youth get caught up in seeing that transgender people struggle and they see what the legal profession is doing to us, and they cannot see past that to see all of the transgender people that are successful and contributing and doing great things for the world and for their communities and doing all those things. They cannot be what they cannot see. And our focus and our drive needs to be to move us beyond what the media has consistently portrayed us as and move into an area where we can show that there is room for success and happiness and love and families. So many of them just don't see that because all they see is the bad. The third thing that I encourage all of us to do is to call out trans adverse comments and attitudes. Don't get pulled into this idea that there is a transgender debate. Trans people's existence is not a subject to debate. We have existed throughout many cultures and many countries throughout history. We are not new. We are not trying to destroy anyone else's identity by sheerly existing. The inclusion of gender diverse language is not in the collective, is not an erasure of any individual. So this idea that the existence of trans women is erasing any sort of women's history, we need to call it out. The inclusion of trans women does not erase women. Inclusion of trans, because they would never say that about trans men. So the inclusion of trans men does not erase men, and nobody's arguing that fact. But of course, the inclusion of trans women does not erase the inclusion of women either. The fourth thing I want us to do is to make sure that we support local organizations who practice trans inclusion. These are your local chapters of your equality organizations, Equality Washington, your local youth centers. There are several LGBT youth centers down in the Tacoma and the Seattle area that could use your support. PFLAG chapters that are all these folks that are on the ground in your states are leading the charge at the state level to make sure that people come together to testify and to make education known at the state level to those that are trying to erase them in the legislatures. So please make sure that you are supporting those local organizations. You can support national ones too, but I'm going to say the local ones are the ones on the ground doing good work right now. The fifth thing I want us to remember, that as I stand here and I speak to you, is that I'm a white trans guy with passing privilege, which means that and free healthcare, which means that my existence and my experience is wholly different from the vast majority of trans people. Yes, I have testified and I've done a lot of things from the front, but my main job in doing so is to bring forth the opportunity to bring other stories to the forefront. So please listen to their stories. I encourage you to listen to the stories of people like Janet Mock and Monica Roberts, God rest her soul, Angelica Ross and Fallon Fox, those folks that are on the front lines doing good things as visible and successful trans women of color and other trans people. Find those trans masculine stories, because so often our trans masculine stories get lost. I encourage you to find their stories, know their stories, and be ready to tell them when people start using trans adverse language or they don't know that there are trans people who are successful. And the last thing I want to say is listen to actual experts. There are a lot of people who seem to think that they know what is going on with transgender people, and they don't. Listen to those. That means people who are not driven by binaries, by religion or animus. That means avoiding things like Matt Walsh and Ben Shapiro and Joe Rogan and Jordan Peterson. All of those folks that are the loudest typically know the least when it comes to the transgender experience. None of those people actually know trans people. None of those people have treated trans people. None of them have medical doctors, with the exception of Jordan Peterson, but he's never met a trans person he didn't like or that he liked. So please make sure that you are reaching out and you are using actual expert testimony and talking to doctors that treat trans people. There are several books out there by Bryn Tannehill and Jameson Green, University of California, San Francisco, Boston Children's Hospital. They all have great resources that we can use. So as we come into talking about Transgender Day of Remembrance, yes, we will mourn and we will say those names here in a moment. But our collective grief must be met by collective action. And we must take today to do what we need to do to remember our dead, remember those that we have lost. But tomorrow and in the morning, God's love must shine through us and through the community. And I thank you for the opportunity again to come and speak to you, because it is always a great time, always a great opportunity, and my gratefulness in being able to speak to you today. So thank you.
Thank you for those words, Blake. I believe we follow Blake on Facebook, and I believe that there is an actual, if you go to his Facebook page, I believe you'll find pictures of what he's talking about from the U.S. Naval Submarine Museum at Keyport. And there's some interesting writing there that I won't read it because I don't have it on it's on my phone, but I don't have it there. But if you get a chance, take a look at that, because Blake has done a lot of things. We remember Blake, or we know Blake as Blake. We don't know Blake as his previous person, but she was one of the first women to serve on submarines and to qualify that way. He has got very many patches that he wears on his shirt on what he's qualified. He's qualified surface, he's qualified submarines, he's qualified air supply, I believe, and everything else like that. The one thing to remember is he always brings those submarines back to the top, which is where they should be. I welcome up to the chancel those who will be reading names this year. As we bring those people up, these names were shared by Eve Pela, who offered this brief introduction to read. Rainbow Crew Northwest offers a short list of names of transgender people who died by violence or suicide in the last year for churches and temples to read in their services or groups in November. We review the reading of these names as a welcoming of the spirits of all those who didn't have enough welcome in their lives, and we all know the people, trans or not, like that. This year we look around at the laws and rules aimed at trans youth and their families, and so the list leans in that direction. We read names of those we lost to save those we know. Our hope is to reach all who have trans youth and their families and to say plainly, we are here with you. Let us now stand witness to the names of the beloved lost ones.
Eden Knight, age 23, 12 March 2023, Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. Suicide after she was coerced into returning to Saudi Arabia from the US, where she had been a student. Eden had been separated from her support network, isolated, pressured to return to Saudi Arabia, and then forced to detransition. Alex Bendall, age 18, 23 April 2023, Dorchester, United Kingdom. Suicide. Alex's body was found in the River Frome on Sunday, 23rd April, 70 days after he'd been reported missing on Sunday, 12th February.
Nova Dunn, age 14, May 17th, 2023, Manchester, New Hampshire. Suicide. The 14-year-old transgender youth left his school, walked down Hughes Road to the overpass over busy Interstate 293, climbed the 6-foot chain link fence, and leapt into the eastbound traffic. Brianna Gay, age 16, February 11th, 2023, Warrington, United Kingdom. Brianna was stabbed in a park in a village near Warrington. 2 15-year-old teenagers have been arrested and charged with murder.
Kahina Sakharova, age 21, February 27th, 2023, Smallingerland, Netherlands. Kina died by suicide in a Dutch refugee camp. She was a Russian refugee who had applied for asylum in the Netherlands and had complained of long waiting times to access HRT. Zemina Madrid Flores, December 14th, 2022, Teotihuacan, Mexico. Emina's body was found in the remains of the ancient city of Teotihuacan on Wednesday, the 14th of December. She had been missing since Monday, the 12th of December. It is not known whether her death was a result of homicide or suicide.
Miles Fitzpatrick, age 17, 7th of November in 2022, Manville, New Jersey. Miles died by suicide after enduring bullying and harassment at school. After his death, his supportive family filed a lawsuit against his school, alleging that they failed to prevent or act on the treatment he had received from the students. Omi Gandhi, age 16, 16th of May, 2023, Salt Lake City, Utah, shot by his father, who then turned the gun on himself.
Daniel David Aston, age 28. Kelly Loving, age 40, on the 19th of November, 2022, Colorado Springs, Colorado. Daniel and Kelly were 2 transgender people who were murdered in the Club Q killings in Colorado Springs.